My fellow South-Eaters, they just ended SADC summit in Zimbabwe, blue-ticked the Mozambican crisis, swept it under the carpet and then walked over it like it doesn't exist. And it gets worse. You see, in that summit, SADC actually congratulated Daniel Chapo for winning the Botswana election. Yeah, I kid you not. And in case you're not aware, Daniel Chapo is the guy who recently won the Mozambique election, or the controversial Mozambique election, which plunged that country into a crisis which has now claimed the lives of at least 50 people. That is the crisis which SADC is sweeping under the carpet. Actually, no, under the doormat. Actually, no, under their armpits. Meanwhile, the president of Zambia, Hakainde Hichilema, chose to spend some time with Steve Harvey, then travel to Zimbabwe to attend the SADC Extraordinary Summit. Hichilema has now missed 2 consecutive SADC summits hosted by Zimbabwe. Though, to be fair, he wasn't the only head of state absent in that summit. In fact, only 4 heads of state traveled to Zimbabwe to attend that summit. The rest were, well, too busy to attend. Which then begs the question, are SADC leaders sending a subliminal message to their chairman? Or are people reading too much into it? Well, fellow South-Eaters, slay queens and bingers, socialites, papalites, vasinamalites, varkujgarais, nevasinamarites. Welcome to the special report. Now, my fellow South-Eaters, and here I'm referring to the Zimbabwean-based South-Eaters. Those are the people I'm addressing right now. Guys, as a starting point in this video, let's go to Botswana and take a look at what their new president has been up to. Actually, no, we don't have to go to Botswana because their president is always in Zimbabwe nowadays. So let's stay in Zimbabwe and take a look at what the new president of Botswana, Duma Boko, has been up to. Of course, I'm being playfully naughty because Duma Boko is not always in Zimbabwe. In fact, he's only been to Zimbabwe, I think, twice since his inauguration, which makes it 1 visit per week, which seems rather strange, especially given the fact that the Zimbabwean government was supporting the Botswana Democratic Party in the just ended Botswana elections, which by interpretation means the Zimbabwean government was against Duma Boko. But it seems Duma Boko has decided to let bygones be bygones. But some Zimbabweans are worried, if not disappointed. They feel Duma Boko shouldn't mix and mingle with the Zimbabwean president. Some are worried that Boko might go out the Levi-Mwanawasa way. Remember in 2008, after months of publicly criticizing ZANU-PF, the then Zambian president Levi-Mwanawasa suffered a stroke at the African Union summit in Egypt and died 2 months later. But of course, I'm not saying that Levi-Mwanawasa was killed by ZANU-PF. I simply said, in 2008, Levi-Mwanawasa used to criticize ZANU-PF. He then suffered a stroke and died. See, what you do with this information or how you interpret it is completely up to you. Who am I to interfere with your creativity? Far be it from me. But whatever the case is, could that be the reason why the Zambian president Hakainde Hichilema has snubbed the last 2 SADC summits hosted by Zimbabwe? Because ZANU-PF has in the past publicly stated that the Zambian president is a national security threat to Zimbabwe. The Zimbabwean president even told the Russian president that Zambia is working with America to destabilize Zimbabwe. So, even though Hichilema has never criticized ZANU-PF like Mwanawasa, he is still viewed as an enemy by the Zimbabwean ruling party. However, the Duma Boko situation is different. The new president of Botswana is not criticizing ZANU-PF, he has never criticized ZANU-PF, and seemingly isn't even planning on doing it if recent events are anything to go by. So, why are people scared for his life? After all, killing Duma Boko won't immediately bring back the BDP into power, because according to the constitution of Botswana, if a president dies, the vice president takes over, plus Duma Boko's party, the UDC, has a majority in parliament. Any vacancy in the office of president will always be filled by Duma Boko's UDC party. So, until Duma Boko starts threatening the foreign policy of Zimbabwe, or I should say, until he starts threatening the interests of ZANU-PF, well, ZANU-PF won't have any motivation to cause any harm to him whatsoever. And also, there is currently no real motivation for ZANU-PF to bring back the Botswana Democratic Party, the BDP. It is important for us to remember that apart from Mnangagwa's relationship with Masisi, who by the way stated that he won't run again for president, ZANU-PF doesn't actually have any significant relationship with the Botswana Democratic Party. In fact, ideologically, ZANU-PF and the Botswana Democratic Party are very different. Let me lay out the differences. See, to liberate Zimbabwe, ZANU and ZAPU were assisted by China and Russia, respectively, which explains why Zimbabwe has strong ties with China and why you saw the Zimbabwean president Emmerson Mnangagwa complaining about Zambia to the Russian president Putin. Mnangagwa told Putin that Zimbabwe is independent because of Russia and China, of course, the Look East policy. On the other hand, the Botswana Democratic Party, the BDP, in its early days was actually despised by the Russians because of its proximity to the British. You see, before Botswana's independence, the Russians favored a party called the Botswana People's Party, BPP, which propagated hardline anti-apartheid policies and employed more socialist rhetoric than the Botswana Democratic Party. Meaning to say, if Botswana had gone to war for independence, the Botswana People's Party, BPP, would have most certainly led that war assisted by the Russians and possibly would have ended up ruling Botswana after independence. But when the decolonization process started, the British did not delay granting majority rule to Botswana like they did to Zimbabwe. So there was no need for an armed struggle in Botswana. Elections were held in 1965 and the Botswana Democratic Party won and ruled Botswana for 58 years. In those 58 years, the Botswana Democratic Party has always had an excellent relationship with the West. In fact, Botswana has on many occasions voted on the side of America on critical issues in international forums, including every United Nations debate criticizing Russia's 2022 invasion of Ukraine. I am saying all this to show you how different ZANU-PF is to the Botswana Democratic Party from an ideological standpoint. ZANU-PF is pro-East and the BDP, the Botswana Democratic Party, is pro-West. It can't get any different than that. However, Botswana's good relations with the West has never really been an issue for ZANU-PF because Botswana never criticized or challenged ZANU-PF's electoral system until Ian Khama took over. When Ian Khama came to power, he started publicly criticizing ZANU-PF and even took in Morgan Tsvangirai in 2008, who had run away from Zimbabwe fearing for his life. Ironically, in 1983, Botswana also took in Joshua Nkomo, who had also run away from Zimbabwe fearing for his life during the Gukurahundi period. It seems Botswana is a safe haven for Zimbabwean political refugees. So you see, ZANU-PF and the BDP, don't have strong ties. In fact, they don't have any ties at all. After all, the BDP's foreign policy on Zimbabwe changes based on who is president, which then means ZANU-PF is prepared to work with any party in Botswana for as long as that party doesn't threaten the geopolitical interests of ZANU-PF, which explains the overtures being made by ZANU-PF to Duma Boko with a view to bring him closer. It's part of damage control. Look, there is no doubt that ZANU-PF would have preferred Masisi to be president, but things went down south, so this is plan B. And for Duma Boko, it's simple. He is no longer president of an opposition party. He is now president of Botswana, so he puts the interests of Botswana first. Not the interests of opposition parties in Zimbabwe, not the interests of ZANU-PF. He puts the interests of Botswana first. And that means establishing a good working relationship with all neighboring countries, including Zimbabwe. But no one as yet fully understands what and how the foreign policy of Botswana will be like under Duma Boko. But it's clear that Duma Boko wants Botswana to be a friend to all and an enemy to none. But I just hope, for the love of God, that he doesn't end up choosing sides between the East and the West. Because quite frankly, there is no better devil between the two. These are superpowers competing for African resources. The West doesn't love Africa. They want African resources. Equally, the East doesn't love Africa. They are after African resources. Therefore, Africa does not need to pick sides. We simply need to deal with anyone who presents the best deal for Africa. And if no one is presenting the best deal, let's demand for one. Let's leverage the demand for our resources to demand for the best deal on the table, not picking sides. Again, I say, these are superpowers competing for African resources. There is no better devil here. Africa does not need to pick sides. Anyway, back to the issue, back to the story, back to the subject. Sorry, I digressed. ZANU-PF is on a quest. The preservation of its geopolitical influence, making sure that all of its friends survive the wind of change that is sweeping through Southern Africa. It's to the benefit of ZANU-PF that Frelimo survives in Mozambique, that SWAPO survives in Namibia, that the ANC survives in South Africa, that the MPLA digs in Angola, that Chama Cha Mapinduzi digs in Tanzania. These are the friends of ZANU-PF, the countries that don't question when human rights abuses are being committed in Zimbabwe, countries that are quick to congratulate ZANU-PF for winning elections dubiously, scandalously. Seriously? Countries whose ruling parties periodically meet ZANU-PF to discuss their power retention strategy and how to counter what they call the regime change agenda in the region. That, ladies and gentlemen, is the reason why President Mnangagwa and his team resisted calls for Mozambique to be put on the agenda in the just ended SADC Extraordinary Summit hosted by Zimbabwe. This coming Wednesday, Namibia goes to the polls, the toughest election yet for the ruling SWAPO party. With ZANU-PF's notoriety of interfering in the electoral processes of neighboring countries, are we going to see yet another electoral crisis surfacing in Namibia? And who is going to emerge victorious? Well, whatever happens, I'll be here to marinate you with all the details without fear or favor, because on this platform, we say it as it is. And as always, thank you so much for watching, and if you enjoy the content, please like and share.
Fere fit